Okay, today's daf we're going to be learning is Gittin daf and Zion. A few quick announcements. First of all, I'll be on Zoom for the next few days, and then starting Monday, there is no Zoom, starting Monday of next week. So there won't be Zoom from then, and we'll start back up again at the end of August, on August 27th. I'll announce again a few things about the Shiur. Number one, so the Shiur is taking place on August 13th, the usual time at 8:30 p.m. Israel time, 1:30 in Eastern time. And the Shiur will be taking place live this time in Atlantic Beach in New York. So if anyone's around and they want to join, that would be great. We have 2 women finishing Shas, which will be very exciting. And I'll be speaking, finishing the daf. And my husband, Seth Farber, he'll be speaking, specifically connecting between what we've been learning and to actual things that go on today in the courts, with some interesting stories and cases that he's dealt with. That will be the Shiur. So the registration will go up probably sometime at the beginning of August, and you can register for the Zoom there. There'll be details to email in terms of getting the address if you want to show up, and to RSVP and let people know you're coming. Okay, that's the Shiur. The second thing is the bookmarks. I'm just reminding you, there's, I think, 1 or 2 left to sponsor. If anyone's interested in sponsoring, you can email us. And I think that covers all the announcements. Okay. And by the way, there'll be Shiurim in Israel. I'm not sure how many, depending on who's around. There'll definitely be some happening. Definitely one is happening in Modi'in, and that will be the one that will be on Zoom. So that's happening on Monday night, August 14th. If anybody wants to come to that. And again, as it gets closer, we'll announce. We'll put up on the website. It'll be on the Hebrew side of the site where Shiurim are happening in Israel. Okay, starting from the bottom of Nun Vav Amud Bet. So we start with Onkelos. We're going to have a bunch of converts today, which is kind of, again, we're going to see this contrast between the Jews not really having the right perspective, and somehow the Gentiles are getting wind of what's going on and that God is behind everything. And we're going to see that in a bunch of the stories today. We're continuing in the stories of the destruction, again, very appropriate for this time of year during the 3 weeks. And what you're going to learn today, hopefully you will see when you're in davening on Tisha B'Av morning and saying keynote, the keynote reference all of these or many of these stories that we're going to see. So we're going to see a whole story that there's one keynote just based on that one story. We'll get to some more as we go on in the next, also on the upcoming daf. We're with Onkelos Bar Kochva, which is Onkelos, the famous ger, the one who has a translation of the Torah. He is the nephew of Titus, and basically what he does is he brings up Titus from the dead. He wants to know, what's the story, who's up there, who's nechshav in the world to come, who's important. And he says the Jews, and then he says, so should I join them? And he says, don't join them. You'll never be able to keep up with all their mitzvot. And then he says, well, what happened to you because of what you did to the Jewish people? And I'm sorry, we didn't get to that yet. Sorry. Then he says, right, what his recommendation to Titus's recommendation is you should destroy them, because it says in the pasuk that whoever destroys them will be at the top. To which Onkelos asks the most appropriate question, which is, okay, we ended with this yesterday. Dine dahu gavra b'mai. So what's your judgment there up in the heavens because of what you did? So Amar Le, so on the one hand he says, it'll be good for you if you kill the Jewish people, but then he says, well, what's happening to you up in the heavens? And then he starts to say how terrible it is, and he says, what I said about myself actually came true in a bad way. Remember, he had said, I want people, this is where we finished just before Onkelos Hager. He said, I want them to cremate me when I'm dead and scatter my ashes so that they won't be able to judge me. So they're scattered all across the 7 seas. To which he says, well, I'll tell you what happens to me up there. Every day they gather at my ashes from all around the world. They put me back together. They judge me. And then they burn me again. They burn my body. And they scatter my ashes in the 7 seas. So kind of he got what he asked for, but in a very bad way. That's his first person he brings up from the dead. Then he continues. Now he brings up Bilam. Okay, the prophet who basically was hired by the Jews. We just read about this, right? It was hired basically to curse the Jews, but in the end ends up blessing them. Anyway, Bilam, he brings him up. Amarle, man chashuv bahu alma. He said, who's important up there? He didn't want to take Titus's word for it. Amarle Yisrael. So he says, Maulid bukebu. So should I become part of the Jewish people? Amarle lo tidrosh laman b'tovatam kol hayamim. What's interesting, Bilam, right? He worked for the king of Moab, and he basically says, listen, I'm taking this pasuk that the Jews said about the Ammonites and Moabites, which is don't ask for their good or bad, like stay away from them entirely all your days. He pushes that pasuk on them, basically, don't have anything to do with the Jews. Now, he doesn't say destroy them. Everyone we're going to see goes down a level. He doesn't say destroy them, but he says you shouldn't have anything to do with them. Amarle, Dina Dahu Gabar B'mai. Okay, you went up against the Jews. So what do they do to you up in the heaven? Or not in heaven, but up there. Amarle B'shifat Zera Rotacha. Pretty disgusting. They boil me in semen on a daily basis. Azal Aske B'negida Leposh'ei Yisrael. Now you might have a different version. Mine says Posh'ei Yisrael, but others say Yeshu HaNotzri. Some say Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia, who's connected, associated with Yeshua HaNotzri. Unclear if Yeshua HaNotzri is actually Jesus. Some people claim because Yeshua ben Prachia is not in the time of Jesus, for like 100 years before him. So, but he was he appears in Pirkei Avot, but then he goes bad after that. Basically, he leaves Judaism. We don't know exactly who this is, but either it's some sort of reference to Jesus or some sort of reference to someone who preceded Jesus, who somehow is somewhat associated. We don't know exactly, but anyway, he brings up another either person or, according to my version, which probably was taken out because of the censor, it just gives a general term, Posh'ei Israel, those who went against the Jews. Amar le, which is weird because Posh'im is plural, and then it says Amar le, which is singular. So clearly this was changed at some point. Anyway, he says to Man Chashibahu Alma, same question he asked him, who's important in the world to come. Amar le Yisrael. So the Jewish people. Mauli bukebahu. Should we? And yes, we saw this in Sota, the same thing, right? Thank you for reminding me. I couldn't remember who was the teacher of who. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia was the teacher of Yeshu HaNotzri. That's why Yeshu HaNotzri, they think it can't possibly be associated with Jesus. But anyway, now we're going to continue because Notzri just means from Nazareth, right? And it could be he had the same name, but also was someone who wasn't obviously in the path of Judaism. In any case, he says, should I cleave to him? Should I cleave to them? Should I become part of the Jewish people? Amar le tovatam drosh, ra'atam lo tidrosh. So he takes the pasuk from before, and he says, listen, you can ask about their well-being, but don't try to get involved in doing bad to them, okay? Instead of being neutral, right, stay away from being bad. You can be good to them, but don't be bad to them because, right, this is the opposite of what Titus said, which is, make them suffer. And this comes from a pasuk in the Nevuot of Zecharia. We're going to see Zecharia later today, but not the same Zecharia. So not to get confused, there's a book of Torah about the Zecharia, the prophet. There it says that anyone who touches the Jewish people, it's like touching the pupil of your eye, which will basically cause you to not be able to see very well. So don't touch them. Amarle, dini dahu gavra b'mai. What are you judged for up in the head up there? Amarle, bitzo arotacha. Okay, boiling feces. So, as if the semen wasn't disgusting enough, now we're in boiling feces. To Amar Mar, as it said, kolam al igal divrei chachamim. This, by the way, sounds Jesus-like, right? Someone who mocks the words of the rabbis, because basically he was Jewish, but left the path of the rabbinic traditions. Nidon bitzo arotacha is ruled by feces, boiled feces. Tachazin mabe. Now, the end of this section. So basically, Onkelos becomes a ger once he hears all these, he brings up these people from the dead, hears what they have to say, and realizes that I should join the Jewish people. He doesn't really take their advice, but he does understand from what they said that the Jews are the ones who have God on their side, I guess you would say. So now they say, look at the difference between them, because you see that the Posh'ei Israel weren't as bad as the Nevi'ei Umot HaOlam, right? Like Bilam, who basically said worse than the Posh'ei Israel said. And now we go back to the beginning. Where did we start? On Nun Hamabet, we started with the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. This is the end, the closing of that story. Tanya Amar Rabbi Elazar, in the Beitar it says, Rabbi Elazar says, Bo re'ei kama gdola kochasha busha. How great is the power is the strength of humiliation? Shaharei siyah kadosh baruch hu et Bar Kamsa v'churiv v'beitov v'sarat v'techalo. Because God, in the end, helped Bar Kamsa, who was trying to destroy the Jewish people, and with that, he destroyed his home, right, the Beit HaMikdash, and burned his sanctuary. all because of the humiliation of Bar Kochva. Now, if you remember when we started, we said three things. We said, Jerusalem was destroyed based on that. And then we said, the mountain of the king was destroyed because of a rooster and a hen. And the shaft of a carriage, Beitar. Beitar was destroyed. Beitar, by the way, is a reference to the destruction of Beitar happened in the time of the Bar Kochva rebellion, which is about 60 some odd years after, right, in 134, after the destruction, which was in 70. So today's daf, we're going to go between the destruction of the temple, which we started with. That was the second temple they're discussing. Then we're going to move to Beitar. Then, right, with this Tor Malka seems to be happening during the destruction of the second temple. Then we have the Beitar. And then we're going to go back to Bayit Rishon, to the first temple. So we're basically talking about all sorts of different destructions, not just the temple being destroyed. So a Tarnagol, Zecharia Tor Malka. Okay, this sounds a little bit strange, a rooster and a hen. So let's see. And yes, you should definitely read Shuli Mishkan's article this week. And Machshava Shniya Yafi Climber is coming out also about the, it's all related to these stories. Hers is coming out about a story that's going to be in tomorrow's daf. But you can listen to it before because it's all kind of related. I'm not sure if it's gone up yet, but it will go up at some point today. Here was a custom. The custom was, when a chatan and kala would go out, okay, at the wedding or maybe after the wedding, they would bring out a rooster and a hen, klomar pru rebuke tarnagolim, okay, as a go, be fruitful and multiplied like the rooster and the hen. So Yom Echad have a kachalif gunda de Romai. So one day, a Roman, I'm not sure if it's a troop came through. Yeah, a troop of Romans came through. Shaklinu minayu naflu alayu machun. So they took away the rooster and the hen, this wedding celebration, and they didn't have the rooster and the hen now to bring out to the bride and groom. So what did they do? The Jews started attacking the Romans who took away their rooster and hen. If somebody sees this on the street, they see the Jews attacking this fleet of this gedud of Romans. They say, the Jews are rebelling. So the Roman emperor sends out troops to go destroy the Jews. And we're going to see as the story develops what exactly happened here, but how they destroyed them. But what I want you to understand first is this is a ridiculous story because yes, we have this custom to take out a rooster and a hen, but first of all, have you heard of this custom? Right? It obviously wasn't a long-lasting custom. And even if it was a long-lasting custom, it's a custom, right? There's a whole problem, and we're going to see this throughout the stories with perspective, right? Just like the Kamsa Bar Kamsa story. What's the big deal? Just leave him at your meal, right? Like no understanding of perspective and making big deals out of little things, right? Taking like the Bar Kamsa, right? They turn this right, and not thinking like you, right, Becky, of ramifications, which we discussed already in the previous dapim, right? How it's the whole idea of this tikkun olam, of not understanding what the ramifications of your actions are going to be, and really trying to understand what's important and what's not important. So in the end, this caused their destruction of this place called Tor Malka, the Torah's mountain. Havabuhu Bar Daroma. So now how did the destruction come about? Well, there was this guy, Bar Darom, to have a kavitz mila v'katabu. He could jump a meal. He sounds like a superhero. He could jump and would go a distance of a meal, which is 2,000 cubits, which is about a kilometer. Okay, now, then katabu, and he killed a lot of Romans. He was very powerful. This one guy. The Jews weren't doing very much, but this one person, Bar Daroma, he could really get to everybody. Now, by the way, his name is interesting. Bar Daroma sounds like from Roma, right? And Rome is the Romans, right? They were against us, but it's probably Bar Daroma, the guy from the south, but it does have this double sound. Anyway, he starts killing the Romans. The Roman emperor sees this. Shakle Kesar Litage, he takes up his crown, and he puts it down on the ground. Amal, Ribone da'al makule, he says, the God of this entire world. Now, notice he sees God right away. Ini chalach, and it's good for you. Lo timsarei lahu gavra lidide ulimalchute biyade dehu gavra. He says, if it's good to you, Hu Gavra, he calls himself in the third person. He said, I don't want me and my people to fall in the hands of one person. That would be the biggest humiliation for us if our entire country and our entire empire was destroyed because of one person, that would be a humiliation. I'm just going to take my crown off and I'm surrendering. Sounds good, right? But obviously something goes bad because we're in the stories of the destruction. What actually brought his downfall then? It wasn't the Romans. It was his own mouth. Why? Amal, Halo ata Elohim, he quotes a pasuk from Tilim, from Psalms. Halo ata Elohim zenachtan. God, you left us. V'lo tetzei Elohim b'tzivotenu, and God won't come fight in our battles, which basically means I'm fighting all on my own. This is all my own strength. It's the exact antithesis, right? Or it's actually not the antithesis, the exact when the Torah says don't say, right? That my strength did this. So basically he says, right, it's all me. David nami amar hachi. So they say, I don't see what was so bad. David said this also, meaning this is the pasuk from Tehillim. We attribute Tehillim to David. So if he's quoting a verse from Psalms, how bad could that be? So they say, this is a great line, David atmoy kamitama. David was asking it as a question. It's all about your tone and how you say it and how you punctuate it. David said it is, God, why did you leave us? And kind of, did you leave us? Are you not going to come out and fight with us? And Bardaroma said it as a statement, and that has a whole different connotation. So what happened? How did he die then? If the Romans didn't kill him because they surrendered, it was his mouth, well, that he didn't die yet. He goes into the bathroom, which is really the outhouse. Ata dracona, a snake comes, because it was an outhouse. The snake comes in. It came, ate out his insides, and he dies. Amar, now the emperor says, look, a miracle happened to me because this guy was killing all my people, just died in obviously a miraculous way. So you know what? It must be God is all powerful. I'm going to just leave the Jews alone right now. Sounds like a good ending. Shavkinu va'azal, so he leaves the Jews and he goes out. Again, the Jews lose a little bit of perspective and they start to rejoice and they dance and they eat and they drink. V'liku shraga, and they light tons of candles. So many candles again these exaggerated stories. Today's going to be all a lot of exaggerated stories. Until you could see they had these signet rings with engravings in them. You could see the engraving in the signet ring from a distance of a meal. We're going to go back to this meal. This meal is going to come up a lot from a distance of a kilometer, basically. And so the emperor saw this. Amar miftech chachadu b'Yehudai. Wow, the Jews are rejoicing because of my downfall. Hadar ata alayu. He comes back to attack them. He says, this is not appropriate. Okay, it's one thing I lost, but I'm not going to have people celebrating my downfall. So he comes up and he kills them. So now what happened? Amar Rabbi Asi, Slat mea alfe shlife saife alu l'tormalka. Okay, we're going to get all these numbers. 3 is always a big number in stories. So 300,000 sword-bearing people come to this Tormalka, this place. That's what we've been talking about. For 3 days and 3 nights. Again, the number 3. 3 days and 3 nights, they killed the Jews. Ubahach Gisa, this is the big line here. On the other side of the mountain, Hilula v'chinge, below Havayade Hani Bahanik. We have this mountain. On one side of the mountain, Jews are being slaughtered. On the other side of the mountain, they're rejoicing, and they have no clue what's going on the other side. So we talked before about perspective. Here we really have loss of perspective, that they're on the other side of the mountain and they have no idea what's happening to Jews there. Again, it's this lack of concern, like in the Bar Kochva story where the rabbis just stood there doing nothing about it, right? Whether they really didn't know or they didn't care to know, whatever it is, there's obviously something wrong with everybody's perspective here, and they don't even realize what's happening. Now we're going to quote a pasuk, Bila Adonai v'lo chamal et kol ne'ot Yaakov. Okay, this is a pasuk in Echa, destruction of the temple. It says God destroyed and had no mercy on the houses of Jacob. So what's the drasha on this? Ki ata Rabin Amar Rabbi Yochanan elu shishim ribo ayarot shayu l'liana hamelech b'har hamelech. Okay, this is Har Hamelech. It's the same thing. Tor Malka, Har Hamelech. One is in Aramaic, one is in Hebrew. So there were 600,000. Okay, that's the number of the people who left Egypt. 600,000 cities or villages here that Yana Hamelech had on this mountain. The Amar, again, exaggerating. They're trying to say there were masses of Jews here and they were all killed. The Amar of Yud Amar Asi Shishim Ribo Ayarot Hayulo Liana Hamelech Bahar Hamelech Okay, he says this is Rabban is passing on this Torah that also Rabbi Yehuda had said, each of these 600,000 cities had 600,000 inhabitants. Other than 3, which had double the amount of Yotzei Mitzrayim. What were these cities? Kfar Bish, Kfar Sichniya, Kfar Sichniya. So now they're going to darshan the names of these cities, the villages. Kfar Bish, which is a place of humiliation. They wouldn't bring in guests at all. So that's what they were called, Kfar Bish. Kfar Sichniya, the way they made their money was through cress. They would sell cress. I don't know if that's a negative thing or not. The first one is obviously negative. This just seems neutral. Kfar Zecharia, this is a bit of a weird one. Zecharia means Zachar. Okay, Dalet and Zion switch in Aramaic, which means males. Now you're going to see, Rabbi Yochanan, Shayu Neshotehem Yodot Zcharim Tchila. First they would have male children. V'Yodot Nekeva Ba'achrona, and then they would have female children who poskot, and then they would stop having children. Well, this means they have one male, one female, and then that was it. Right? Again, hard to imagine every single person gave birth in this way. First a male, then a female. Anyway, that's why they were called the village of the males, because they all had male children first. Amar Ula, L'didi Chazalehu Atva, I saw this place. You can't even hold 600,000 reeds, forget about 600,000 people. What Ula was trying to say is this was miraculous, that somehow, right, now the city looks so small, but somehow was able to have all these inhabitants. So now, on account of that, Rabbi Chanina, a heretic came along and said to Rabbi Chanina, Shikura Mashkaritu, you guys are definitely lying. There's no way there were 600,000 people living in these villages. Amar Le, Eretz Tzvi Ktiva, it's called the land of Tzvi. What's like a deer? If you take off its skin, then the flesh, right, it starts to contract. When people are living there, it's as if the skin is on the animal and then the animal can grow, right? It stretches. But you're living in the time where it was destroyed. Now nobody's living here. When no one's living there, gamda, it contracts, just like the tzvi. Okay, so this was the story of Tarnagola, Charev, Tormalka. We're kind of finished with that story, but now we're going to talk about one other element. And to get to that element, we're going to talk about this other city in Egypt called Sichniya. So we have 3 rabbis sitting around talking. Rav Chilkiah Bar Tuvia, possibly was his father, and Rav Huna Bar Chia, Habuyat Ve'Gabe'adade, they were sitting together. One said, if anybody knows anything about this place, people from this place, let me know. That's what they really want to know. These people apparently were destroyed. They want to know, were they destroyed because were they good people or were they really bad people? And then the question is, if they were good, which we're going to get to, that they were good, why was the city destroyed? The story of an engaged couple that both were taken into captivity by the Gentiles, and they married them off to each other. Amralo, she said to him, they were only betrothed, they weren't married. So she says to him, please don't touch me. Because we're not married, I don't have a ketubah yet. He didn't touch her until the day he died. And when he died, she said to them, eulogize this man, he was so great that even though his yetzer was so, his inclination to sleep with me was so strong, more than Yosef, and yet he didn't succumb to the temptation. What was the difference between him and Yosef? Well, Yosef, Yosef, it was only one time. And this was every day. Now, there are versions of the Midrash which came to him every day, but according to the story in the Torah, it was only once. And this was every single day. Yosef la b'chadamita. He wasn't with her in one bed every night. Hi b'chadamita. He was in bed with her every single night. Yosef la v'ishto v'ha'ishto. And Yosef she wasn't his wife. She was someone else's wife. And this was actually his wife. They just weren't finished. They hadn't done the marriage yet. Hatach idach b'ama. Another story. So here you see, first of all, so far we see story of people who really kept the mitzvah. Second story. So the price was 40 se'ah for 1 dinar. All of a sudden the price went up, that you could only get 39 for a dinar. Ubadku matzu. So they went and checked and said, what went wrong here? And they went and did internal check. This also shows a good community where they realize when that happens, it's the hand of God, what we were saying before, right? They didn't see the hand of God in this. They found a father and a son who basically slept with an Aram or Asa on Yom Kippur. So now, then, 1 second, the price dropped. I thought it was the opposite. Modi'ah, it was 39 for a dinar. That means the price goes up, no? No, you're right. The price goes down. You could get 39 for a dinar, right? You're right. The price went down. My mistake. The prices all went down. I guess it wasn't good for them. They were selling. So anyway, a father and a son now slept with this betrothed woman on Yom Kippur. And they did judgment on him. Okay, they basically brought him to the court and stoned him. Chazara Sharlin Komo, and the price went back to where it was before. Patach Idach Bamar. So that was story number 2, where again you see the worst and bad people, but right, just they were doing the worst of the worst, but it was all taken care of. Third story. He wanted to divorce his wife. But what was the problem? The k'tuba was too high. He didn't want to pay the money. So what did he do? Crazy story. He invited his best friends. He gave them food to eat and drink. He got them drunk. He puts them all in one bed with his wife. And he takes the egg white and he puts an egg white on the bed to make it look like there was semen on the bed and that something happened. And then he could say, oh, my wife cheated on me and I could get divorced her without giving her k'tuba. He brings witnesses after the action to look and see, and they see the semen on the bed with all the people on the bed with his wife, and they go to the court. So there was this elderly judge, he was from the students of Shemaya, his name was Bava ben Buta, Amar, and he said to them, I have a tradition from Shemaya, it's interesting, they would talk about this. If it's egg white, it'll basically contract and it'll harden from the fire. You heat it up, and if it's semen, it'll get absorbed basically. But so they went and they checked and they realized it was egg white and it wasn't semen. And they brought him to the court and they made him give her the k'tuba man. So now Abai says to Rav Yosef, okay, I heard this story these 3 guys were talking about, so I don't get it. So why were these people punished if, right, the assumption is people were destroyed? Why were they punished if they were good people? Amar Lein, and this is why this is brought here, Mishum delo i'abel al Yerushalayim. They were very happy in their lives in Egypt. They were good Jews, but they weren't remorseful. They didn't feel bad. They weren't sad at all they didn't mourn for Jerusalem. Okay, specifically, it's good to talk about this in a time when we're in the 3 weeks and we're about to get to Tisha B'Av, it's the real time for mourning on Jerusalem, how important it is to mourn for Jerusalem. Deftiv, Simchut Yerushalayim v'gilu ba kol ohavah, sisu itam asos kol hamitablim aleha. You should rejoice with Jerusalem and be happy in all those who love her. But then it says the people who are really going to rejoice are the ones who mourn for her because they appreciate the greatness of the city and what's missing. That's the end of the section. So we did Kamsa Bar Kamsa, we did the Tarnagol and the Tarnagolata. From there, we got off on this tangent about how important it is to mourn for Jerusalem. And now we're back to the third story. Ashaka de Risbach Chared Beitar. The shaft of the carriage, Beitar was destroyed. It's going to start off the same kind of idea, all from a minhag. And again, misplaced perspective here. Dahavu nehige, the minhag was, when a child was born, a male child was born, they would plant a cedar tree. When a female was born, they would plant a cypress tree. And when they would get married, they would cut down the trees, and they would make the canopy, the chuppah from those trees. Yom Echad, the daughter of the Kesar comes by, eat bar shaka de rispa. The shaft of her carriage breaks. What does she do? Katsu arzava ailula. So she takes, or her people probably, cut from one of these cedar trees and they put it on her carriage. The people go crazy. What do you mean? That's our cedar tree. We need it for our minhag. It's so important. So they start beating the Romans. Same thing. They say the Jews are rebelling against you. And they go and they attack the Jews. And that's how Beitar happens. Here's a pasuk from Eicha again, another pasuk. God destroyed the Karen of Israel. So Amar Rabbi Zer, Amar Rabbi Yavau, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, what is this? This is a reference to Beitar, even though it's not in the time of Eicha, but it's a reference to what will happen in the future, that they're going to take 80,000 weapons of war. They go into Beitar when they captured it. They killed men, women, and children until the blood ran from there all the way into the Mediterranean. If you think it was close, it was a distance of a meal away from the Yam HaGadol. Okay, again, we have this meal coming up. There's two streams there in that area. One goes in each direction. And in that time, they estimated that 2/3 of it was water, but a whole third of it was full of blood, from all the blood of all the people. In a Braita, they say they didn't need fertilizer for the next 7 years, the people living there, because all the nations that kind of took over, because they had enough from the blood in the water that fertilized their fields for all that time. Okay, that was Amud Aleph. Now we're moving to Amud Bet. You can see these dapim are very long. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Avin, Amar Rabbi Shua ben Korcha. Now we're already talking about blood. Now we're going to get to a very famous story of Zecharia. Zecharia is not Zecharia in Trasar. He's a different Zecharia who appears in different ayam in Bet, chapter 24, verses 20 to 22. And it talks there about Zecharia. He was the son of Yehoyada Kohen, and he comes to rebuke the people. And the people don't like to hear the rebuke, and they basically kill him. They murder him in cold blood. They stone him. And now we're going to see a story about the first temple. So he says the following: So an elderly person from the Anshe Yerushalayim told me this story. In this valley, he killed 211 times 10,000, okay, which is 2,110,000. In the Quran, by the way, it says 211,000, which isn't true because Ribo, we always say Shishim Ribo. Ribo is 10,000. So this is basically 211 times 10,000. So that would be 2,100,000. That's 940,000. So basically he murdered all these people until their blood got mixed in with the blood of Zecharia. Okay, this is a pasuk in Hosea where it says the blood of the bloods will touch, and this is the story of Zecharia we're going to hear. So first of all, it doesn't happen very often. There's a few stories. There's Gedalia, right? There's Zecharia here who's assassinated, basically killed by the Jewish people. So the blood, Nevuzaraden, who's the head of the army of Nebuchadnezzar, who basically does, he's involved in the whole destruction of the first temple. He finds when he gets to the temple, he sees on the floor of the temple this blood boiling. Okay, and it's just keeps coming up from the ground, boiling. He doesn't know what it is. Amri, my high, he says, what is it? Amri, they didn't want to tell him. So they told him, oh, it's just, we're in the temple, there's always sacrifice, it's just blood that's spilled on the ground from the sacrifices. Aite dame velo idmu. So now that they brought, this is a play on words of the dame and idmu, he brought blood from an animal, and it didn't look like this blood. Okay, idmu is it wasn't similar. You realize they're lying to me. Amar lehu, iamaritu limuta. Says, listen, if you tell me what's the real thing going on here, that'll be good for you, even though it's not going to be good at all. But he says it'll be good for you. Bilam, and if not, otherwise I'm going to comb you with iron hot combs, right, which is the way they killed Rabbi Akiva. Amruleh, my name, Allah. He said, what are we going to tell you? Look, Nevi'ah have a bean. There was a Navi among us, a prophet. He brought us words of God and rebuked us with it. So we got up and we killed him. And his blood for already a bunch of years is just not settling. Okay, there's an entire kina all about this blood and this story. So he says, okay, I'll take care of it for you. In a very nice way. We're going to see in a very not nice way, he's going to take care of this. Right? What do you have to do? You have to punish the rulers. So he takes the heads of the small courts and the big courts, kills them all. Didn't help. The blood keeps boiling over. He takes the young lads and maidens, nothing. He takes the little kids, kills them, nothing happens. Nevuzaraden looks and he looks at the blood of Zecharia and he says, Zecharia, you lost the best of your people. You want me to kill everybody? So after he makes that statement, so he succeeds in actually getting the blood to stop boiling. All of a sudden, he decides to repent when he sees this. He was so amazed by what he saw. He says, wow, if for one soul, this is what God does, because the Jews killed this one person, this person, meaning myself, I killed all these people. Wow, what's going to happen when I die? In other words, I'm going to be brought to judgment. Like basically what he's saying is, I killed these hundreds of thousands of people because of one body, right? And only after that was God come. What's going to happen to me, right? I killed all these people. I'm going to really be in trouble. He sends home. This is kind of funny they mention this, but I guess it's showing a total cutoff from his past. He sends a deed of like what to do with all my property and Igayr, and he goes to convert. Tana, and it's bright to says Naaman ger toshavayaf. Remember Naaman, he was cured by Elisha, and he basically becomes a believer in God. He doesn't really become a Jew, he becomes a ger toshav, which means he basically keeps the 7 Noachad laws. But Nevuzaraden ger tzedek, he was a real ger. He converted fully to Judaism. And not only did he convert, right? Think about it, he was the one who destroyed the first temple. Well, Haman limdu Torah b'bnei Brak. This is a funny line, right? The descendants of Haman became teachers in Bnei Brak. It said same of Sisra taught Jews the children in Jerusalem, and they became public teachers, the ones of Sanchereb. These are all people that destroyed the Jewish people at different times of history. Who were the ones of Sanchereb? Shemaya and Avtalion, who were the teachers of Hillel and Shammai. They were converts who basically were from, according to this, came from Sanchereb. And now, ending the story of Zecharia, this is what it says: I put your blood on a flat rock, a stone that will never be covered. Right? It wasn't covered up. That was the blood of Zecharia. That's a reference. So we have 2 psukim that reference it. One is damim b'damim nagau, that when the blood of all the people that Nevuzaraden killed touched the blood of Zecharia, right? They kind of came together. And also this blood was never covered. Now we go back to way back in history when Yaakov goes to get the bracha and he dresses up as Esav, and Yitzchak says to him, "Akol kol Yaakov hayadayim midei Esav." The voice is Yaakov's, but the hands are Esav's. So now they're going to say Hakol is the call of the crying out of the Jews because of Esav. Okay, almost like a midah keneged midah. He stole the bracha, and then in the end, we're going to see the call was Adrianus Caesar, from the Roman emperor, Shad Ragba Alexander Shemitzrayim Shishim Ribal Shishim Ribal Kiflaim Kyotzei Mitzrayim. He killed double the amount of Jews in Egypt, and the Jews cried out. Now it says Hakol Kol Yaakov. There's a double language of Kol here. So the second is Kol Yaakov. Aspasianus Kesar Sharag B'Krach Beitar Arba Me'ot Ribo. Now we're jumping ahead to Beitar in the Bar Kochva rebellion, where he killed 400. Well, it's really 4 million. Right? Which is 40 million, some people say. Well, who caused all this? This is the evil Malchut. They destroyed our house, they destroyed the sanctuary, they burnt it and sent us out, exiled us from our land. Davar acher, a totally different interpretation of this pasuk. Hakol kol Yaakov, this is more like, what are the strengths of everybody? Yaakov is in the kol. The tefillot that work are the ones of the Jews. All the wars that are fought, the winners always come from Esav. Now we're going back to the very beginning. Kamsa bar kamsa. So we're kind of closing the circle here. This is what Rabbi Elazar says, Bishot lashon techave, which is when you get hit from the tongue, which is bechir chule lashon techave. When you hear when there's refilut, when there's right, that would all happen because of bad words and words that were said, and then he passed on words to the Romans. Right, stay far away from that. Now moving on. We're still in the destruction. We're still going to continue stories of the destruction for the next while. I'm Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. My dechtiv al naharot Babel sham yashavnu gam bachinu b'zacharenu et Zion. Right, we were on the rivers of Babylon where we cried, remembering Zion. Now this is weird because David HaMelech, this is from Tehillim, and it was attributed to David HaMelech. He wasn't there at the destruction. What's he talking about? God showed him the future destruction. Korban bayit rishon shneimar al narot Babel. That's the Babylonian exile. Sham yashavnu gam bachinu. There we sat and cried. Bayit sheni, because it says later on in that same parak, that same chapter, dechtiv zachor Hashem lebnei Edom et Yom Yerushalayim hamrim ar Yisobah, which is the Bnei Edom, which are the Edomites, which came from Esav, which are the Romans. Okay. Now, from here to the end of the daf, we're going to basically be dealing with one pasuk, which is Ki alecha horagnu kol hayom, a pasuk in Tehillim also. We basically died for God all the day. Nechshavnu katzon tivcha. We were like lambs to slaughter, which basically is like, was hefker, like there were so many deaths. So now the question is, what does this pasuk mean? We're going to have 5 different interpretations. 2 have to do with the Churban, and then the other 3 are very quick at the end. They have nothing to do with any of this stuff. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel v'Itema Rabbi Ami v'Amar Lem Manita Tana. So maybe it was a Beitar, maybe he said it. Anyway, let's start with our story. 400 children, boys and girls, were taken captive in order to engage in prostitution. The women for concubines, Rashi says, and the boys for sodomy. They realized what was happening. If we drown, are we going to come to Olam Haba? Will we get basically saying if we commit suicide, will we get to the world to come? So the oldest among them said, God says, I will return you from the Bashan, I will return you from the depths of the sea. What is Mibashan? Mibain Shine Aryeh Ashiv. If you get eaten by lions, I'll bring you back. Those who drown in the sea. So immediately the girls heard it. They didn't waste a second, they jumped right into the sea. Okay, the girls went right away. The boys have to start thinking about it and kind of more from a cerebral place. So what do they say? They do a kal v'chomer. They say, now, the girls were going to basically engage in sexual relations in a normal manner. Well, it still was prostitution, but at least it was in a normal way. But us was going to be not in a normal way of doing it. Well, the more so should we do it. So, and now we get to this pasuk, which I mentioned before, but this pasuk is a reference to that story. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, second explanation. This is a very similar story to the story of Yehudit that's told in the Hanukkah story, but this is a different time and a different place. So this is a woman and her 7 sons. They brought the first one in front of the Kesar, the Roman emperor. He said, go worship. Oh, sorry. I was confused. I think Yehudit, she have a similar story. Anyway, you're right. It's Hannah and her 7 sons. Thank you for correcting me. Go worship idols. Amarle, Katuba Torah, and then he basically had an idol there, go bow down. So Amarle, Lahu, Katuba Torah, Nochi Hashem Lokecha. It says in the Torah, God is our God. Afku v'katlu, they kill him. Achu li'idach l'kami kesar, the second one. Amarle, Plach l'avodah zarah, it's going to be the same thing. Worship avodah zarah. Amarlu, Katuba Torah, Lo yeh l'chaluim achirim al panayim, can't have any other gods. Afku v'katlu, they take him and they kill him. Achu li'idach, number 3. Amrule, plach l'avodah zarah, go worship idols. Amarlu, Katuba Torah, Zoveach l'elohim yacharam, the one who does that will be ostracized. No, I can't do it. Afku v'katlu, they kill him. Achu li'idach, number 4. Amrule, plach l'avodah zarah, go worship idols. Amarlu, Katuba Torah, lo tishtachaveh le'el nichar, you can't bow down to other gods. Afku v'katlu, they kill him. Atu li'idach, amr le plach lavodah zara. Amr lu katu b'torah, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Says, right, God is our God, one, only one, not idols. Afku v'katlu, they kill him. Atu li'idach, amr le plach lavodah zara. Amr lu katu b'torah, v'yadata yom ha'shevota el bavecha from aleinu, ki Hashem Elokim b'shamayim ma'al v'al ha'aretz mitachat ein od. Okay, so also, you can't do it. There's only one God, he's the God. Afku v'katlu. We're up to the seventh one. Aju li'idach, amr le plach lavodah zara, amar lu, katu b'torah, et Hashem amarta, v'Hashem hamricha yom. Which is supposed to say, Kfar nishbanu l'kadosh baruch hu she'ein anu ma'avirim oto be'el acher. We promised God that we won't change him for any other God. V'af hu nishba lanu, and this is the two-way street, right? Basically, we do to God, we choose him, and God chose us. Af hu nishba lanu she'eino ma'avir otanu b'umah acheret. He will never change us for any other nation. Amar le Kesal, now the Kesar is already getting desperate. He says, I need one of you to bow down. I don't mind killing you all, but in the end, I need to show that you're bowing down to idols. So listen, I'm going to throw you a gushpanka, my signet ring. Begachem b'shakol, bow down, pick it up. You won't bow down to idols, but at least it'll look like. So kiheche delemru, people will say, kavalele harmana demalka. He accepted the king's jurisdiction, or he's going to listen to. So Amarle, Chaval Kesar, sorry, I can't do it. If you think it's so important for your respect, all the more so I have to have respect for my God. So they take him out to kill him. The mother says, just let me kiss him before you kill him. As she went to kiss him, she says to him, Banai, go tell Avraham your father when you get up to Shemayim, you did only one altar. In the end, he didn't even have to sacrifice his son. And I lost 7. Okay, so right, very harsh words. She goes up to the roof, and basically she also kills herself. We have again this suicide theme. The voice comes out and says the mother of the sons is happy because she was happy that all her sons stood up and kept, masru nafsham al kiddush Hashem. Okay, this was the second interpretation of Alecha Horagnu Kol Hayom, and we went Katzon Lativcha. Now we have 3 other interpretations of the pasuk, which doesn't have anything to do with the destruction. Rabbi Shov and Levi Amar Zomilah Shenitna B'Shmini. Alecha Horagnu Kol Hayom is Brit Milah, because we basically, there's always a little danger in the Brit Milah, and yet, right, we spill blood as if we kind of take blood as if it's like death, and that's how we keep the mitzvah of Brit Milah. It's our way of, it's similar in a sense of a Kiddush Hashem, I guess you could say, but it's sacrificing ourselves, but not in a way we're actually dying. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amal, Elu Talmidei Chachamim shemorin hilchot shchita ba'atzman. They show shchita on themselves. They practice on each other, obviously not exactly slaughtering themselves, but da'amar Rava kol milei lichzei inish benafshe. You should do all these things on your own, other than bar mishchita v'davar acher. You shouldn't do shchita, and you shouldn't show davar acher. Some people say davar acher is sexual relations. You shouldn't kind of show how to do it. Or some people say it's actually like leprosy in terms of teaching how to do leprosy. Don't try to make leprous marks on yourself. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, 5th interpretation, with this we'll finish. Elu talmidei chachamim shemimitim atzmam al divrei Torah. Alecha Horagnu Kol Hayom is we pour out, we sacrifice ourselves to learn Torah. We kill ourselves over Torah learning. Kid Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, as he said, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Ein divrei Torah mitkayimim ela b'misha mimit atzmo aleihem. Torah will only be in those who basically sacrifice themselves for it. And they learn from there that if you Torah, if you kill yourself for learning Torah, that you will get the biggest reward. So those 3 interpretations are very different about the mitzvot that we do, where we kind of sacrifice ourselves to keep the mitzvot. Okay, with that, we'll finish for today. It's not really a daf that needs reviewing, but it's all about the Agadah Korban. We're going to go on, continue with these stories in tomorrow's daf. Have a great day, everyone.